So I think we are good to go. Oh, let me click go live on Instagram and then we should be good.
Okay. I'm just trying to get the stream key.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Take your time.
Now it won't let me do it. I've been having tech issues with Instagram.
Me too. Me too.
Okay, let
That
me.
might be the case. Hi, Emily. Thanks for tuning in. We are seeing if we can go live on Instagram as well, but classic Instagram is giving us some tech problems. So we'll keep trying, but I also don't want to hold us up either.
Yeah, it's not working for me. So maybe we can just um, be here. I don't want to keep messing with Instagram. It's been kind of moody with me all day today.
Yeah, I don't know how the weather is for you, but it's very gloomy, gray, and rainy here, and so I'm blaming that for Instagram being moody as well.
Yeah. Sometimes. All right. Well, I can't see who's on, but maybe we can get started. And then if there's any questions that you see on your end, Kara, we can address them too. Get there.
Sounds good. Yep, I'm getting messages in the chat. So if you are here and you want to say hi, Pop Emily Merrill is here. She said hi. But if anyone else is here and wants to let us know you're here, we'd love to know who out there in the universe is watching this. So yeah, Elizabeth, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah. So welcome everyone. I'm so excited to be here with Kara to start our series, The Money Conversation. So Kara and I have connected through this amazing networking group Emily's on. It's a secondary degree society. And then we just found out that we had a lot of synchronicities. So I want to do a quick intro for those of you who don't know who both of us are, and then kick off the conversation. And we really want to start this conversation around what you should know about your money before you get married. And then we're hoping to do a series of these and talk about all things around relationships and money. So I'll go first. I am a money coach for women. I focus on helping women with all things personal finance and making sure they have the resources they need to support themselves now and in the future, and that they're always financially equipped to make the choices that they want. And Kara, did you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes, so I'm Kara Francis. I originally got my start in the divorce field as a divorce attorney, working at traditional law firms. Did that for about 6.5 years and then pivoted to coaching 2.5 years ago. So not only do I do divorce coaching, but I also do pre-marriage and marriage coaching. And so, like Elizabeth said, there was just a lot of alignment here as far as empowering yourself through these money conversations and not allowing the money to sort of take power over you, because it can be a very difficult thing to talk about sometimes. And so this is really about taking back some of your power so that you can have these conversations effectively and confidently. So yeah, today, as Elizabeth said, we are talking about things to know and discuss about your finances before you get married. So Elizabeth, what are your initial thoughts, or what's maybe one initial question or topic or area that you would recommend people be aware of?
Yeah, so one thing I want to mention too is one of the things that Kara and I have in common is I was married before, so I'm on my second marriage now. And I know some of the things that I experienced in that first relationship, I was able to really learn from and take to my now relationship. And one of the big things is talking about money right away. And I know sometimes it can be a taboo subject or uncomfortable to bring up, but it's so important to just tackle it head on, because you can get in front of so many things or issues that can spiral and become bigger early. So that is one of the key things I wanted to kind of into is why bringing up this topic is so important initially, and honestly, even on the first date. So what do you think about that, Kara?
I couldn't agree more. Like Elizabeth said, another thing that we have in common is we've each been married and divorced before. So I will be getting married again, my second marriage next June. So another parallel there with Liz. And I can safely say that I did not have these types of conversations prior to or really even during my first marriage. We very much kept our finances completely separate from each other and didn't really have any conversations about any particular topic pertaining to money unless it was a bill that needed to be paid or, we bought a house, but like very surface level, not deep, not vulnerable, not really getting to the core emotions and needs and desires that really drive how we feel and how we think about money. And if you can't talk about it before you get married, it's going to probably be even that much harder when you're married, because now you have the pressure of, well, we're married now, so we have to figure this out. And anytime you have that additional pressure, it just makes things more emotional. And so it's very important to start having this open, transparent dialogue about money before you get married so that you can really set that foundation for your marriage.
Yeah.
And my apologies, my cat likes to join and it's easier to just like
That's okay. We'll take another guess. Why do you think it's so uncomfortable to bring up, or why do you think it's so common that people avoid it? Because as you and I both know, and I think research shows too, is money can be one of the biggest things that causes people to separate or even divorce. But why do you think it's such a tough thing to bring up or talk about?
I think it all comes back to emotions, and we, at least in this society, right, have kind of been modeled and observed and learned that emotions get in the way. They make things messy. It's not efficient. So it's sort of like a waste of time to go to the emotions. Like, let's just use logic and practicality and push forward. And so I think generally as our culture, and it's getting better, it's improving, but we're all a little hesitant to talk about the emotional stuff. And something that is so mathematical, black and white, transactional as money carries so much emotion and energy behind it. And it's like it impacts how we show up and how we see the world. And if you think about it, we each have our unique perspective of the world and specifically money. And so then when you combine that with another person's specific view of the world and their interpretation of money and how they feel about money, there's room for a lot of tension and conflict there, which can be worked through, but sometimes we don't know how to handle it. And I think that's where the issues sometimes come up.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that I've worked with my clients and also in my own relationship is I think a lot of the times we try to have the money topic or the conversation starting with looking at the numbers. And just based on what you were saying about how much deeper it can be, one of the things I actually like to start with is talking about your money story and really like what your experience is with money from childhood till now, and really giving yourself that space to be vulnerable and talk about what kind of beliefs or thoughts you have and like why you have the relationship with money, how you saw it being handled growing up. I think that gives you a better foundation as far as like having the money conversation and understanding why each of you might have different perspectives. Neither of them are wrong or right. It's based on your experience. So what do you think about that? And how do you see that in your own relationship and also in the relationships that you work with as a coach?
Yes, I love what you said about money story, because that all goes back to our interpretations of our reality. And sometimes you hear this quote of like, your perception is your reality. So the way you see the world and the way you feel that's your reality, but it might not be the same as somebody else's. And so that's why it's so important to approach this with curiosity and as opposed to trying to be right or trying to win, right? Because that's never going to happen. Like that's impossible because our perception is our reality. And so really embracing the curiosity of why your partner thinks and feels the way they do about money. Like you said, Liz, like how they grew up, what was modeled to them, what's been their experience as an adult so far, including in prior relationships. And knowing that each of your stories are right because they're right to you. So it's about empathizing and acknowledging your partner's money story. And the more we can come at it from a place of curiosity and trying to find a solution based upon where we're currently at, right? Accepting what is and not trying to change the other person. Like if we accept that from the get-go and then find solutions from there, it tends to lend itself to less conflict because the other person doesn't feel attacked, they feel heard, they feel validated. And I'm curious to know, like, how, like, what are some common, like, fears or mindset issues that, like, your clients have with their money story? Like, just like some common examples that maybe the audience could relate to.
Yeah, I see a lot of kind of opposites with my clients, not all the time, but, and when I say opposites, it's like there's one that's they want to like really manage the money and be on top of it. Sometimes even over organize it or micromanagement. And then there's one that maybe is a little bit more avoidant. And in some of those situations, the micromanaging or just wanting to be on top of it comes from that's their way of feeling secure. They might have come from a background where they didn't grow up with much, or maybe that was how money was modeled to them, is really being on top of it and constantly like looking at your accounts and constantly talking about money, or maybe always talking about how you don't have enough. So them checking accounts and managing it helps them feel more secure. Whereas sometimes I'll see another side of that partnership where the avoidance might come up because maybe money was a source of fighting or anxiety. They might have seen their parents argue about it a lot. So then maybe the tendency is to avoid it because they want to avoid any conflict. And I see a lot of fear around scarcity, not having enough, or just not being good with it. What about you, Kara?
Yes, these are all things that can definitely impact the dynamic between you and your partner. So, for example, growing up, I very much grew up in the type of environment where you know, we're not spending frivolously, right? And that's different for everybody. Yeah. But it's about, you know, let's save as much as we can and put away as much as we can for like the future. Whereas somebody else may have grown up in a family where maybe they were living paycheck to paycheck, or maybe they had they were well off, but they believed in like spending money in the moment and not saving it for a rainy day. So you can see how those two could really butt up against each other if we don't have productive conversations about it, because that can really quickly create resentment if one person feels like they're the only one saving for the future and for emergencies, and the other one's just kind of like money's coming in and out and there's really no thinking about the future. I do really like what you brought up about avoiding, though, whether it's avoiding because you don't think you're good with money, or you're scared to see how much money you're spending, and like it's a big reality check. But obviously, you know, when we continue to avoid this issue or this topic, it just further amplifies those emotions and the stress and the anxiety, and it's like always hanging over your head. So what's like, let's talk about what, like, some specific things that might be helpful for people to discuss with their partner before they get married, on the topic of finances. So do you want to kick off with an example?
Yeah, thank you. So I think one of the biggest things is be okay to ask what your financial situation is. You can ask how much do you make? What are your values around money? Um, what are your spending habits? Do you prefer spending over saving? Are there specific goals that you have when it comes to money? What does it look like if we were to manage our money together? Does it look like us combining accounts, or do you want to keep something separate, or a combination of both? What does long term look like? Do you have a goal to retire and maybe never work? And what does that look like for me, and vice versa? It's like really having those conversations around everything. And it seems like even talking about retirement especially when you're early in a relationship, might not be as big of a deal, or maybe something to worry about later. But the more you can get those topics out on the table now, the more you open the conversation, even if how you feel about it changes or adjusts, that's okay. It's just opening the conversation and really understanding the values and expectations of somebody. I think also talking about like how you view money and kids, how you view money and your family. Um, do you want to like lend money to your family, or like are you co-signing on loans? And what is your do you have any boundaries about that? I know personally when I had the conversation with my own husband, one of the boundaries I said is like I don't co-sign loans for family. That's a hard no for me.
Mhm.
And we also just have boundaries around if we lend money to family and things like that, because we just want to make sure that we're on the same page. So really talking about all those key topics as early as possible, I think is key. And it not only like helps you communicate, it helps you set clear boundaries. It also helps you identify where you might have differences. So then you can work together to decide how you're going to resolve those differences, or how you'll manage those differences together. Because if you disagree, that doesn't mean either one of you are wrong or right. It just means you have different perspectives. And when you come together, you're working as a team to find solution and compromise.
Yeah, I love what you said about it's okay if things change, right? And so Liz just listed off a bunch of good things to talk about with your partner now in the present moment, right? So, like income, expenses, spender versus saver, future goals, retirement, and things of that nature, managing the bills, who's paying, etc. This isn't like a scenario where in our current life circumstances we share this, and then 5-10 years from now circumstances change and your partner's like, well, you didn't say that 10 years ago, or like a gotcha moment, right? Because we're human and there's so much about life that we can't control. But the important thing, like you said, Liz, is that you are having the conversation. Having the conversation in and of itself is almost equally, if not more important than the substance of the conversation. It's you're planting the seed and you're getting your reps in of talking about things that can be difficult or feel scary or vulnerable to talk about, and you're doing it together as a team. And I, in relation to like my pre-marriage coaching generally, the way I look at it is, okay, right now you're engaged, you're prepping for a wedding, like theoretically this is the most exciting time in your relationship and you're over the moon and happy and in love. If you can't talk about these things now, think about like after 5 years or 10 years of marriage, and maybe you have a couple of young toddlers who are like screaming and you're both stressed from work, or there's other issues going on, right? So it's like if you don't set this foundation now, it's going to be really hard to do it in the future if things have become more stressful, or maybe you're upset with each other. And so this is really like building blocks for your future. I think another important thing that has come up with me, both coaching and as a lawyer, is this idea of visibility and transparency into finances. And so there's still a lot, we still have out there that traditional setup of one spouse is the primary earner, the other maybe is the primary parent, or runs the home. And in that kind of scenario, it's almost like it's very important for the non employed spouse, or the spouse who's not employed outside the home, to have visibility into what the finances are, access to the information, and being on the same page before big purchases, and being aware of what our monthly spend is each month, because that can also create resentment as well if you feel like you don't have any sort of visibility, your opinion isn't valued, or you're not actively participating on the financial side. And what I've seen is, if divorce is in your future, that can make that process that much more difficult, because you're learning for the first time, like, this is what we have, this is what we bring in, this is what we spend, right? And it can be very overwhelming. And so I think that's where Liz can be super helpful to people entering marriage, regardless of what the current work dynamic is now. Like, if you're both working full time, then like it's still very important to like start to lay those building blocks, so that if your relationship changes in the future, you are still financially educated and empowered. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I love what you were saying about, especially before you get married, you're kind of in this phase where you're so in love and you're excited and you're planning a wedding and all that. And I really like to think about it a different way as far as having the money conversation. Because a lot of times it's like, well, we don't want to talk about that because we're like so happy. And that seems like a tough conversation to have. That is honestly the best time to have it, because you are so in love. You have your best interest, each other's best interest in mind. You're happy and thinking about your future. And so you're already elated and in this great mood with each other and happy to be with each other. So that's the best time to talk about money. The other thing I really encourage is to make it a regular conversation. I really like to encourage my clients, and I do this too, is to have regular money dates. And I really do mean a date. Like, I'm right, time when both of you can be completely focused on each other and the conversation you're having. Cook a meal at home, have a glass of wine. That's what usually my husband and I like to do, or watch a movie or something, or have an activity planned afterwards that you both look forward to, and talk about your budget, your expenses, what worked previously. If you're doing what worked the month before, what are how are you progressing on your goals, or any new goals that you want to talk about, any questions or issues you guys want to address together. And the key is to really keep the conversation going, and also keep in mind that you're a team. You're there to tackle it together and solution together, not each other. And I think having that conversation ongoing, to your other point, Kara, which was amazing, is if you already established that habit, when you do come to these different points in your life where things can change, you already have a vehicle and an environment where you can have that discussion and decide together how that changes your money.
Yeah. And I think also, like, I love what you said about teamwork, right? And this is something that I learned in mediation training. So I didn't make this quote up, but it's like, attack the problem, not the person, right? This is a problem that we have. So we need to work together to find a solution, because attacking the other person is going to put you in that energy space of trying to win or trying to be right. And even if you solve the problem, it plants that little morsel of like resentment in the other spouse, of like, well, we figured it out, but I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel validated. I ended up just giving in to what she wanted because I was tired of talking about it, right? So it's like, really focus on the issue or the problem at hand, and what can each of you bring, your unique way of looking at the world, your unique experience. Like, what can each of you bring to the table to solve this problem together? Another thing that just popped into my mind, because this is something that I've even personally struggled with, not just with respect to money, but just like life in general, is you and your partner's decisions and dynamic and dialogue about money, as long as it works for you, it doesn't matter what everyone else is doing. So like the comparison can really make you doubt yourself of like, oh, well, my friend and her husband are doing it this way. We're not doing it that way. But maybe that doesn't feel authentic to you. Maybe the way that you're doing it works for you. And so at the end of the day, there's no one right way to manage your finances as a couple or to talk about money. And just staying present in the moment and focusing on what works best for the two of you, because at the end of the day, that's who is impacted by these decisions.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that, because a lot of times I'll get clients that say, well, how should we organize our accounts? My friend and her husband say, this is the one way you have to do it, or this is how we pay our expenses. And I usually say there's no right or wrong way. The biggest thing is communication and teamwork and deciding what works for you as a couple, and what works for you can be dynamic and change as you go. The other thing that came to mind, Kara, too, because we're talking about prepping for marriage and like having the money conversation. I know you have your lawyer background as well, and I really wanted to bring up the subject of prenups, because a lot of the time that can also be kind of a touchy subject. You know, we think of a prenuptial agreement as already sometimes like, oh, well, that just means I'm preparing for a breakup or I'm anticipating a breakup. And I really want to like flip the perspective of that, because I think it's so important. And it's also another way to, because you do have to go through and like go through the detail of your finances as part of that exercise. And again, it's done in a way that you get to decide what happens, right? Instead of the government deciding.
Right.
And you get to decide together. So I'd love to hear more of your perspective about prenups and why or why not you think it's a beneficial thing to do before marriage.
Yes, this is a great topic. And like you said, it sort of naturally invites you guys to talk about finances, because as part of the prenup, you have to disclose everything that you own and all of the debts that are outstanding. And so it's almost like it can almost be like a jumping off point for deeper conversations. But the prenup itself, it's funny you say this, because I'm like on the cusp of signing mine for my marriage.
Great timing.
So I'm practicing what I preach, and I won't lie. There's been several money conversations in the last month, and it's really required each of us to show up and grow and be curious and not assume anything about the other person or think we know everything, right? It's great timing, because I'm going through this right now. So a prenup is like Liz said, is an opportunity for you and your partner to decide what happens if you end up getting divorced. Marriage is a contract. No matter what, when you get married, it is a contract. So really the issue is, are you making that contract with the state that you live in and allowing the state to determine what happens if you get divorced? Or are you and your partner taking back that power and the control and deciding what you want to happen if you get divorced? And like you mentioned, Liz, like some people say, well, we're in this like wedded happy bliss phase. Like that just seems like a real downer, but it's like, but like what we were talking about earlier, if you can't talk about these issues now when you love each other and are planning for your future together, it's going to be 10 times more difficult to talk about them if, God forbid, like you hate each other. So it's like, it's really an opportunity to open up the dialogue about this and have deeper conversations, not just about money, but about planning for your future in general. And I think there's also this myth out there that like you only need a prenup if you have a ton of money, or if this is like your fifth marriage or something, but that's also not true. There's no sort of requirement of how much money you have or anything like that to do a prenup. Anybody can do a prenup. And what I have found is that it kind of alleviates some of the pressure after you're married because you already know, right, the plan for what happens if you get divorced. So
Mhm.
you don't have it looming over your head like, well, we got to figure this out. We got to figure this out. Otherwise, we might get divorced. And I have no idea what lies down that path. Whereas if you already have this plan in place, you can just not worry about what's going to happen in the future and just stay present in the moment with your partner, especially when difficult times arise. And it in my experience, it causes divorce to feel like less overwhelming or less like this big scary animal that's lurking behind the corner because you already planned for this, you already talked about it. And if you get divorced, like I mentioned, somebody has to determine what happens to your money, to your kids. And so who do you want deciding that at the end of the day? And, the kids, there's a caveat, of course, that like the judge is the ultimate decider when it comes to the kids stuff. So perhaps that one is still up in the air. But to the extent you can take control over the financial aspect and leave less things undetermined for the future, like the better, right? That's one less thing that you need to worry about. Um, so yeah, what are your thoughts on that or any other things that you want to add about prenups?
Yeah, I love everything you said, and I love having your perspective. I know you've seen it in your practice and you're going through it now. Um, it's something I didn't do for my first marriage, and I kind of had the same thoughts. It's like, well, I don't want to prepare myself for breaking up. I wasn't going into the relationship with that intention, so I didn't think I needed it. I wish I had had it when I went through my divorce. It would have made things a lot easier. And I think in some ways I was fortunate because, it wasn't that contentious, but I think having that to refer back to would have just made it easier on both of us because it's an emotional time. You're going through a lot of emotions and stress and all kinds of things in addition to try to figure out the logistics of that, and having it figured out for you ahead of time, I think would have been so helpful. And honestly, now with my second marriage, I don't have the intention of breaking up either, but my whole perspective on it has shifted because I think, like, to your point, it gives you the opportunity to have that conversation and have the tough conversation now. And, best case, you never need it. But then I think it also prepares you for some of those other conversations that you'll have to work out together. Um,
Mhm.
I know some of my clients are going through like things like estate planning. So I I just think there's nothing better than to, like you said, take your power back. Somebody's gonna decide that for you, so you might as well decide it for yourselves and with each other and have it there. It's just like an insurance policy. It's like you insure your car because just in case an accident happens,
Mhm.
that as your safeguard, your foundation. It's kind of the same thing, I think, a prenup. Like,
Yeah,
you
I
like
love that analogy.
think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that analogy. Like you said, nobody enters marriage wanting to get divorced, just like nobody drives a car wanting to get in an accident.
Yeah.
But to the extent you can take precautions and be proactive about protecting yourself in the event something happens, why wouldn't we want to do that, right? Why wouldn't we want to have that safety net? Because the reality of the situation is we're in a relationship with another person. We can't control that person.
Mhm.
And there's always, like, that's what's sometimes scary about being vulnerable, being in a relationship. There's always a chance that it's not going to work out simply due to the fact that like half of the component of a relationship is beyond our control, is the other
Yeah.
person. And so be realistic about that, right? And it's not about being pessimistic like, oh, we're going to get divorced. It's about being realistic, and you only get one life. And so to the extent you can take back that control and that power over the future, does wonders for your emotions and your stress levels in the present moment.
Yeah. So I think we're both saying it's a good idea to explore the prenup into.
Yeah.
I wanted to pause and see if we had any questions. I don't know if we got any from the.
Yeah. Let's see here. I don't see any in the comments.
Okay.
But to the extent you guys watch the replay of this and have questions, leave them in the comments, whether that's on Instagram or LinkedIn, and Liz and I are happy to jump in and give our thoughts. So before we wrap up, Liz, I would love to know, and I'm sure the audience would like to know, how you work with your clients and, what it looks like to have you as their coach.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Elizabeth_Michelle without the I. Also, you can check out my website for my services. So I do one-on-one coaching, both one-on-one with women and one-on-one with couples. My website is Elizabeth Michelle. Michelle is spelled without the I.com. So I'd love for you to reach out. I've got a free guide there that you can sign up for, newsletter, all that good stuff. What about you, Kara?
Yes. So first and foremost, I apologize if you can hear this noise, but I live in New York City, and naturally there's drilling and renovations directly above my ceiling. So I'm trying to not, to focus because it's like, Anyway, yes. So I work with my clients at all stages of the journey. I am actually just this week officially opening doors to a pre-marriage group coaching program.
Yes.
And yeah, and I'm super excited about it because, you saw how much there was and still is to talk about when it comes to money and relationships just in this conversation between Liz and I. You can imagine when you think about all of the other topics and components that go into marriage, it can feel overwhelming. And so this program is really designed to provide you structure to cover all of those issues, get clarity about how you feel about all of these issues, and then prepare to have effective conversations with your partner about these issues. So things like, of course, finances, but also intimacy and conflict resolution and parenting and personal identity, right? And the list goes on. And just like talking about money before you get married, it's important to talk about a lot of other things. This is definitely something I've been learning personally. My fiance and I are doing some couples coaching currently. So again, practice what I preach. And just to be clear, this is for engaged individuals. So it's not for couples. It's to provide that safe space for the individual to get really comfortable with how they feel about these things and then prepare to have that conversation with their partner. So that's coming up around the bend. And then I also offer coaching services for people who are married and maybe feeling disconnected or unfulfilled in their marriage, but not sure that divorce is the path for them. And last but not least, divorce coaching. So no matter where you're at, I got you. I'm here to support you. I've been through it all myself. And so I think both Liz and I have a lot of not just professional experience, but personal experience with money and divorce and all of that stuff. So we're here to support you. You don't have to do it by yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Kara. And for anybody that's listening now or the replay, if you have questions you want us to cover in our next series or episode in this series, please send them our way. You can DM us or post on this video when it's posted on our socials, and we'll make sure that we address those questions live too.
Sounds good. Well, I'm excited for our next money conversation. Liz, it's been fun talking about this topic today, and I'm excited for what's to come.
Me too. Thanks, Kara.
All right. See you later.
Bye.